Well, let's talk a little bit about presidential politics and some other politics as we head into 2016. Steve, what did we learn from the 2014 race about Florida as a political environment for 2016 and the presidential race?
I would say, believe it or not a heck of a lot. And here's why. We live in a very schizophrenic state. You've got one pool of voters voting in a presidential year, big, and you've got a much smaller pool of voters voting in a midterm election year. How else would you possibly explain the following fact about Florida? This is a state that voted twice for Obama and twice for Rick Scott. Are those the same voters? No, they're not in many instances. And so I think the lesson that comes out of this race, of course, is both sides really trying to ramp up the turnout in 2016 and probably using other factors other than just the candidate. For example, you could have medical marijuana come back, but you could also see liberal groups putting like a minimum wage ballot amendment on 2016 to greatly ramp up turnout in urban Florida.
So we're kind of a red on the one hand and the blue.
We're the pendulum state. But I disagree that they're different voters. I think you just have you have the same voters voting in two elections, but you've got a whole bunch of people that don't vote in the midterms. And those are the ones that they tried to pull out and get to vote. The reliable voters that show up in the midterms are white, and they're older. The others are the busy people that don't pay attention. They probably only watch national news when they get their news. They don't really have an idea of what's going on in the state, and those are the ones that are hard to turn out in the midterm.
Clearly, John, Florida could be a very important state in 2016 elections, and we've got two people in Florida right now being eyed as potential presidential candidates, Jeb Bush, former governor, and current Senator Marco Rubio. What are you hearing?
Well, former Governor Bush seems to be aiming at the end of this year for making a decision on this. His brother, the former president, George W. Bush, says it's 50-50. So there's the odds on Jeb. Marco Rubio, likewise, seems to be a candidate that is always ready. He's been in Iowa a lot. He's been campaigning around the nation for candidates during this election cycle that just completed. So he, too, looks like he's pretty interested in 2016. Speculation seems to be that both men will not run, that you're only going to get one Florida horse out of this race. And because Jeb and Marco have had this relationship through the years where Marco was sort of a understudy to Jeb, and Jeb was kind of the mentor for Marco, it seems almost as if Jeb ran, maybe Marco holds back. Then again, maybe Marco Rubio decides to run for president as a little bit of a practice round for maybe a future run at a statewide office like governor.
Jim, if Marco could decide to run for something else, right?
There's a couple things that could happen. If he runs for president in 2016 and does not run for the Senate, there's going to be a sort of a domino effect within Florida politics. I mean, there's already a lot of speculation about a few prominent Republicans. For instance, Jeff Atwater, the state chief financial officer, who's won 2 statewide races by huge margins, that he, may be a possible U.S. Senate candidate. Will Weatherford, the outgoing House Speaker, gets mentioned for a lot of things. So, he's obviously an up-and-comer. Adam Putnam is also mentioned prominently as the Agriculture Commissioner as an up-and-comer. I think most people think that he wants to be governor, though. I mean, I think that's sort of the general impression. But, if Rubio does decide to run for president, it could make 2016 pretty interesting on the state level, too, in terms of the U.S. Senate. I mean, there's been talk about, as John alluded to, that Rubio might want to run for governor in the future. In 2018, that could be, him and Adam Putnam on the ballot. If they were to run against each other, would be a great race. I'm really, the Democrats, if there's a Senate race in 2016, I'm not really sure who would emerge. I mean, Gwen Graham won the congressional race in North Florida, which was one of the biggest Democratic victories nationally in this cycle. She's already being mentioned as a statewide candidate. She hadn't even taken a vote in Congress yet. But and Patrick Murphy is a congressman down in North Palm Beach, Treasure Coast area, and he's won 2 tough races down there, or two races in a relatively tough district for a Democrat. So he's getting mentioned. But who the Democrats have to run against these Republicans, I think, still up in the air.
Mary Ellen, speaking of all these Republicans, we got another figure that might run in Florida. Seems like she might very well run in Florida, named Hillary Clinton. How do any of these Floridians stack up against her in polls you've seen?
You mean Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio specifically? It's very interesting because she does seem to do better than they do in Florida, which is, again, kind of where we are in this weird general election picture. But that can change. Look at where Charlie Crist was 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. So that's still uncertain. But she does seem to poll very well. Now, it's a huge disadvantage that the state is completely run by Republicans. It means it's going to disadvantage her in terms of fundraising. And Florida, she has to win. She has to win. So, it's going to be in play, and we'll see how that all goes.
Who followed the Gwen Graham election? Anybody follow it very closely? Did you, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Talk about how she won, because that was very unusual. That was against the wave. It was against the trend. It was up in North Florida, and everybody expected a lot of support out of Leon County. But how did she win?
I think you have several things going on here. One is she made the very wise decision to do, frankly, something that Charlie Crist should have done more of. She went to the parts of the district where she knew she was going to get hammered. And I'm talking about Taylor County and Gulf County and places like that. This is why it's important how districts are drawn in the reapportionment process, because you have to have a congressional district that has Leon and Gadsden counties in it, two of the most Democratic counties in the state. Well, okay, you look at the results in there. I mean, Sutherland he got creamed in Leon County. He got like 28% of the vote. So she has a huge beachhead of votes going into the other parts of the district, which is all west of Tallahassee pretty much, and which gets very red, very conservative. But, we saw Gwen Graham at the Possum Festival in Warsaw, and she marched in the Forest Parade in Perry, and she went to Weewaa-Hitchka and all these great little Florida towns most people can't pronounce. And she's got she's an attractive candidate, pretty good message, that North Florida way message. Sutherland stubs his toe on a few things, like the wisecrack about lingerie, showers, and things like that. I mean, in a year that was great for Republicans, this was Sutherland's race to lose, and he lost it.
Yeah, and he made a lot of mistakes, and I think that did contribute to it. But hers was probably the smartest campaign I've seen in a very long time. It messaged right, and Steve's right. She worked the district right, and she was the only bright star in the Democrats' constellation.
Speaking of that, the Democrats' constellation, what kind of inner searching will the Democratic Party in Florida, and I know there's going to be a lot nationally. John, what will Democrats be thinking about in Florida the next couple of months or a year about what they need to do?
Well, we're probably still in the period for a while of blame, and that's going to go for a while, and that could rise to questions about the leadership of Florida Democratic Party Chairman Allison Tant. There could be some turnover at the top. But then, at some point, I guess the attention repivots for the presidential race, and you'll start seeing a lot of operatives arriving in the state trying to, set up shop for Hillary and whoever else might be positioned to run as Democrats for president. But I think the Democrats are trying to sort this one out, and they don't really have any clear answers. To some degree, Charlie Crist, for as damaged as he was as a candidate, was perhaps the best candidate for the Democrats to try to rally that Obama machine, and it didn't work. And again, the numbers show, Charlie Crist did about the same as Alex Sink, who 4 years earlier, many people had ridiculed for, not campaigning enough in Broward, being a poor candidate, this type of thing. So a lot of the same questions are around when you have the ultimate candidate, Charlie Crist. So how do they win?
Jim, I've got a couple of minutes left. Probably if Republicans really did well anyway, where it was in the legislature. 6-seat net in the House, 81 votes there, and almost veto-proof in the Senate. Where does this take us as we move forward to the 2015 session?
Well, I think the House will be even more conservative than it is, if that's possible, and it's been a conservative body for a long time. I think two interesting things to watch. One is will Scott have a lot of success in his first term after the election? I think once you get beyond that, you're kind of looking at, he starts to become a lame duck. So this might be when he tries to really strike while the iron's hot, if you will. And the House, probably will go along with him on most of his ideas, like tax cuts and those sorts of things. The other thing that's always interesting to watch in the legislature is that the Senate, while it's dominated by Republicans, it's always more moderate. And it has blocked, initiatives that Scott and the more conservative House has tried to do over the years. Now, will it hang tough on that, or will it, go along with what Scott wants to do? So again, I think this next session, the 2015 session, is going to be really interesting to watch from that standpoint, because they got the numbers. They can do whatever they want, and Scott's won 2 terms. And he can take that to him and say, I won again.